All right, so I'm really excited to be here today with Erin McAndrew. Erin is a musician from LA, right? You're like in the LA area. Okay, awesome. And she's here today. She's going to teach you her method that she sort of developed for playing cover gigs for wineries and for different places around town. And for a lot of musicians, I think one of the biggest challenges is just how do I get started actually supporting myself with my music. Um, and what she's discovered and what she's doing right now is a really fantastic way to, to actually make an income with your music playing live shows while at the same time honing your skills as a musician. And she's, gracious enough to come on here and talk about it. So Erin, thank you so much for being a part of this.
And thank you so much for having me.
So I guess to start out with, I'd love to hear a little bit about your story, about how you got started, like as a musician, and kind of how you found your way to playing these gigs.
Yeah, so I started I've been obviously playing music for a long time and I've been in several bands, and it was getting to the point I was in, I want to say like 2 or 3 cover bands, and we played a few gigs here and there, but there wasn't really anything that was gaining a lot of traction. And I was in this cover band with a friend of mine, and the other people in the band were just like not very reliable. And him and I were very gung ho about like making this happen. And there was one day, this is like, I'm trying to think how long ago it was. Oh, it was 4 years ago. So yeah, 4 years ago, about almost to the day, where we had a huge opportunity for a gig and I couldn't make it. I had like a wedding or something that weekend. And this is like one of those epiphany moments. And he basically, my friend was like, like this is, so I said I couldn't do it. And then the three of them were going to do the gig. And one of the other guys chimed in and was like, oh, well, I don't think we're ready. And then my friend was like, okay, well, we've been practicing for months and months. I'm out. Like, this is, good luck in the future, but like, I don't have time for this anymore. And that's when I kind of like was like, well, I don't have time for this anymore. I think this is a clear sign I need to do this on my own. Like, I need to pursue my own career as a musician. So from there, I like almost immediately I took up guitar lessons, and then that fall ended up booking, I was part of like Reverb Nation, which is still around, but I don't think as many people utilize it as they used to. And I booked the New York City Marathon because they have musicians that play New York City Marathon. And that was the first time where they gave me the date, they gave me the time, they gave me how long I would be playing. Now at this time, I probably only had maybe like 3 or 4 original songs. So did not know how I was going to fill 4 hours of time,
So it was 4 hours.
Yeah, 4 hours, because if you think about it, it's a steady flow of runners that are coming through. And, right. The whole marathon goes on for a good part of the day, but where that chunk is where you are, you have to constantly be playing because there's constantly going to be people running by. So that was obviously extremely intimidating for someone that was not super confident at the time playing guitar in front of an audience anyway. So, I was going to kind of almost rely on my friend, and he was kind of like, no, I'm busy that day. But it was also him kind of being like, I want you to do this on your own. So it was a really good thing for him to push me. So I ended up learning an hour and a half of material and then ended up repeating it. But still, that pushed me into a completely uncomfortable zone that I'd never been into before. I basically learned a bunch of covers. I can't remember how many I learned, but I was practicing every single night. And then I got to the point where I was like, okay, like this, and I did the event and it was great. And I was really proud of how it turned out. And I was like, okay, I want to start doing this, for a living. I want to start like, making this happen. And obviously I still had my day job and whatnot, but for the next few years, it was kind of like me finding what was going to be the best method for me. I started reaching out to places, but I didn't really have any other experience besides this marathon and then like a few other random events. So, I kind of had to find a venue to build a rapport with. And at the time I lived in New York, I started reaching out to a few wineries because I knew that that was probably where I wanted to spend a lot of my time, especially because in New York, not a lot of people know there's a huge wine country out on Long Island. So, and I thought, I'm an acoustic musician. It would probably be I would fit well with that kind of scene, because it obviously really depends on what kind of musician you are for what kind of venue you're going to play. So I started reaching out to some wineries, wasn't really getting anything because I didn't really have much of a, any places I've really played. So I didn't really have much of a resume yet. Then there was this winery in Pennsylvania that was maybe about an hour and a half away from the city. Smaller winery, smaller operation, not the best run winery, but they booked me like 6 or 7 times that year. So it built up a positive rapport with them. And then I started booking other places, and I was actually realizing how unprofessional that they were run. So it was like a good first experience for me to have, because it only got better as time went on. So make a long story short, I played a few gigs that summer. And I started, playing more and more. But it really wasn't until I'd say like the following year when I started booking a lot more consistently. And meanwhile, at this time, I was still at my day job. So I can only, do maybe Fridays or Saturdays for most of my gigs. And also I was in the city, I was doing a lot of Long Island. So it was kind of like, I didn't have the time to commit to it fully. And then I obviously got to this point this year where I completely left my day job, which was super exciting. And now I've kind of come into this method where I reach out to venues every week, at least 20 to 25 venues. And now, because I have built a resume up of different wineries, different breweries, coffee houses, I can kind of tailor my emails specific to that venue. Or by location. So, obviously California is a very large state, and I've played a few places down by San Diego. I've played places in LA, played places north of LA. So I can kind of tailor it depending on what the venue is. So that's kind of where I've gotten to today. I play really, really consistently now. And, it's really all about like staying consistent and staying, not giving up, because obviously I reach out to so many venues every single week, and sometimes I hear back from 4 or 5, other weeks I don't hear back from any. So it's kind of one of those things where you just have to be consistent about it and not give up. So that's what I got so far.
That's amazing. So, okay. So basically you've gotten to a point where you can rely on your music full time. So you actually don't need like a day job. You can just support yourself completely with the gigs that you play.
Yeah. Which
that's
is
amazing.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the goal. I mean, I think that's for a lot of people, that's like an aspiration that they really, really would like to get to. What do you think are some of like the obstacles or the holding blocks for people that like kind of keeping them from making that jump and from doing it?
I hear from a lot of musicians, and there's a lot of people that I've talked to that are like, I don't want to play covers. I want to play my own music. And to be honest, like, to be really blunt, like that's not going to get you that far unless you have like someone completely fully backing you financially that can completely financially support your career somehow. Nowadays it's like when people go somewhere, they don't really want to hear your original music unless you are someone who's an established musician. They want to hear the songs that they know. So I think that people are hesitant to learn covers, and, but that's the thing. If you go and play a venue, most of the times, if you're only going to play originals, they're not going to pay you. If you're going and you're playing covers, they will pay you. What would you prefer? It's kind of a no-brainer. And honestly, it's only enhanced my experience as an artist, learning all these different covers, because it's helped me in my songwriting. It's helped me become a better musician. It's helped me become more well-rounded with different genres of music. And it's also, it's overall just helped me become a better musician because I make these covers my own,
Yeah, I think that's such a good point, because that's true that like a lot of, I don't know, like I guess I don't know if a lot, but it seems like one of the biggest holding blocks for musicians when it comes to those money gigs is thinking that like for some reason there's like something wrong with playing covers, or like it's like less, it's not like it doesn't, you're not as authentic for doing it. But when you look at like some of the most successful musicians, so many of them got their start playing cover songs, like
The
playing some
Rolling Stones, the Beatles, you know,
John Mayer was one of them.
John Mayer, like, you know, so many people. And because
Michael
it's,
Walker.
yeah, exactly. No, it's so true. And I think that that's just almost like an ego thing that musicians just have to get over, and just realize that it's only going to make you better as an artist, and it's going to make you a living as an artist. I mean, obviously down the road you want to be able to just be able to make a living playing your originals, but you have to start somewhere, you know.
Yeah, I think that's so smart. Like one of my favorite ideas is that if you want to achieve like a certain level of success, or do something, the best way to do it is to find 5 people who've already done it and basically just like learn from them, like spend time with them, you know, become friends with them if you can, but if you can't, just, you know, put yourself in their shoes as much as possible and model them. And, you know, you kind of become a reflection of what you surround yourself with.
Yeah.
It's so like, I don't think I've ever seen a single person who's been really successful in some outlet without having like mentors, or without learning from other people who are way ahead of them. You know, it's just like this secret like juice that like can accelerate you so much faster than just trying to do it on your own. It's like trying to reinvent the wheel versus learning from people who are like, you know, have tens of thousands of hours invested in something. So what you said about, you know, learning cover songs actually really helped you to craft your own songwriting and to get
Yeah.
better at playing guitar and singing.
Yeah.
Uh, I think that's a really important, you know, step for a lot of musicians, that even if your goal is to someday, you know, just play original music and just tour, I think it's a pretty necessary step to start out by learning those cover songs and playing those cover gigs. And like you said, it can be a great way to support yourself financially, yeah, in the
Absolutely.
meantime, while you make those steps.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, here's a question. So it sounds like for you, part of the journey was like, you know, starting out, having like a little bit of a lack of confidence, which is totally natural because you hadn't, you know, played a lot of, you didn't have like a whole lot of experience playing gigs before, so you didn't really have much of a resume, like, you know, of reaching out. Maybe one of the challenges that's holding people back is if they haven't, you know, done this before, if they've never reached out to someone, or they've never, you know, played these shows, like, how do I even get started? You know, like, what do I say? What do I do? Like, will they even book me? Will they even pay me if I've never played before? So how would you recommend someone like one of the first steps for them to get started, if they were someone who, you know, let's say, yeah, they knew some cover songs and they wanted to get started doing some of these gigs, but they just weren't sure where to start?
Well, some things I may suggest is there's so many places where, you know, they don't pay musicians, but you can go in and do open mic nights. You can go in and you can, like, if there's like a local coffee shop that has live music, that maybe even though they don't pay musicians, they can give you like a 1 hour slot. There's always places you can start. You could do like a house show for your family and friends, and just you get feedback, like honest feedback from them. Um, you know, there's lots of ways you can get started. You can start doing even just like Facebook lives, like even though that's online, there's still ways you can do that. There's also, depending on where you live, there's lots of opportunities for busking, and there's actually musicians I know that make a full-time living busking, just busking.
Wow.
Especially here in Los Angeles when you can do it year round. But and there's some places you need to have a permit. But there's a girl that she busks on the Santa Monica Pier every single night and can make like $300 in 3 hours, you know? And, you know, that's not ideal for everyone, but that's still a way to start playing and performing outside and in front of an audience, even if it is people walking by, just to get you more comfortable with performing out. So I think that's one way that people could start getting involved. And, you know, say if you do have a local business that you go into often and you're like friends with like the person at the coffee shop or the person at this bar, you know, like, hey, you guys have live music, you know, do you mind me setting up my guitar and just playing for an hour and a half? You know, I'm just playing a bunch of covers. It's, you know, worth it to even just, you know, I'm sure they'd be more than happy to have you, you know?
Yeah. Awesome. So your recommendation for like, if they're just getting started yet, maybe don't even have the confidence because they haven't played, a whole lot of these gigs before. A good place to start is like open mic nights or,
Yeah,
some of these gigs where, they don't have as much of a pressure to perform because they're not necessarily being paid right away. And that kind of
yeah,
gets them more comfortable with it. Even busking. I know Ed Sheeran, that was how he got his start was through busking.
yeah.
I totally agree with that. And I remember my band, we got our start from in high school. There was basically like a coffee house, where at our high school we would have, kind of a time where it was like open mic night basically. And that was really kind of how we started performing together. It was all covers. I mean, really at that point in our careers, we all just wanted to impress girls. So it wasn't like, we were like, oh, okay, let's like eventually start a band and tour around the world. We're like, no, like let's just impress the senior girls. But um, I think that's awesome advice. Yeah, getting started, open mic nights, and they're also such a great way to meet like other musicians and kind of dig your way like into the music scene a little bit. Um, so that's awesome. So let's say now that someone's at the point where they've gotten a little bit more comfortable with like performing, like they've done some cover gigs, and it's still kind of a thrill for them. It's still like a little bit nervous or excitement, but they've gotten to a point where they can perform cover songs well. How would you recommend kind of bridging the gap and actually starting to earn money? Like how do you recommend reaching out to or finding or reaching out to venues and like actually earning an income with it?
Yeah. So I have a few like ways that have been effective for me. One is actually going to venues that have live music and going in and introducing myself to whoever books the music there. Sometimes, I mean, a lot of the times I found when I did that, they're not there, but you get their business card and reach out to them via email. So that's one way I found to be effective. Also, yeah, emailing them has been the most effective tool for me. I know some people will disagree with me, but I found that method to be the most effective. And it really just looks like, hey, my name's Erin McAndrew. I'm a, pop rock cover singer. I play music from the 60s to present. I've played all these venues throughout LA, including, and depending on what kind of venue it is. So if it's like, say, if it's a winery, I'll put all the different wineries I've played at. If it's a brewery, put all the different breweries I've played at, just so it's specifically tailored and that they're like, oh, okay, great. She's played this venue before. Okay, then she can probably play our venue. So
Mhm.
then that's another sentence. And then I also always put my EPK in there. I have a gig performance reel. So, if you're just getting started, it's great to even just have an iPhone video, like a semi good quality iPhone video, just to put something up so they can see you out performing live. Cause that, honestly, it took me a long time to just get that together because more just procrastinating. But I put that up maybe like 2 or 3 months ago, and I've seen a significant increase because people want to see video. So that's another piece of advice that I could give, because I definitely feel like I've gotten a lot more responses since I've added that into my email.
Mm, awesome. So when do you sort of approach the issue of like payment? Is that something? It doesn't sound like that's probably something in the first email that you necessarily talk about. Like, how do you approach it? Is it like on a venue to venue basis, and do they bring it up, or how does that work?
Yeah, so it is usually on a venue to venue basis. I don't come at them and say, "Oh, this is what I charge." If I'm reaching out as a cover singer, most venues are aware, like, "Oh, okay, she generally is going to charge fee." When I get an email back, generally there will be people that are like, oh, how much do you charge? And then I'll tell them what I charge, and
$2
they'll
million.
exactly. No, I'll tell them what I charge, and then they'll email me back saying, oh, okay, that works for us, or we can only afford this. Is that okay? Now, that's kind of one of those situations where is this going to be a good opportunity for me to play this, even though I may not make as much money, or is it worth my time to spend on doing something somewhere else? So those are obviously some of the options that you have to weigh, but usually they will bring up the budget in the email as you continue to go on. So there's a lot of places that do have a fixed rate, but some of them can be negotiable. And and the big thing is like tip jars are gold, because I usually make between an extra $30 to $60 just in tips. So I mean, and for like a 2 or 3 hour gig, that's not too bad. Depending on how many people are there. Sometimes I'll play a venue and there's not that many people there. Sometimes I'll play a venue and it's completely full. So it really honestly depends on the day. There's one day I made $200 in tips. So it's like, it can fluctuate completely. But yeah, I mean, so you also kind of have to figure that you're probably going to be making some money in tips too. So even if they are, not paying you maybe as much, if it's a great opportunity and they allow a tip jar, I mean, I think it's great.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, okay. So probably over time, you've sort of negotiated, or you felt more comfortable charging like higher prices for performing with people. What's like an average gig? And do you notice, are there, let's say for example, like wineries, wineries might be a little bit more like high scale sometimes. Like, do certain venues generally like pay out more? And would you recommend someone getting started to like focus on a certain category of venues, or how would you recommend someone going about that?
It really honestly depends on the venue. It's because there's venues I've played where I've made, $300 or $400. There's venues I've played where I've made $75. But it also is like, what's the exposure? Like that venue that maybe is paying me less, there may be like 100 more people there than the venue that's paying me a little more. So it depends on that too. What was your other question?
It was a question of, I think you might have just answered it there, but like in general, do you kind of notice like some patterns between like, wineries tend to like, pay more, like certain venues that like
Oh,
there's probably different like circuits that you can kind of do?
yeah, and I also think it depends on the music that you play too, because if you are let's say I mean, if you're in a band, you're obviously going to be catered more to bars, and you're going to be catered more to like breweries and things like that. Wineries is definitely a lot more acoustic. If you're like a jazz musician, you'll maybe want to look at like, there's like a lot of like Italian restaurants, or like, even like they're like wine bars that only do jazz, so it's kind of like, I feel like if you're also in that specific niche of a jazz musician, you definitely have an advantage, because there's places that only do jazz music. So I think it honestly depends on the type of musician that you are. But again, like I'm more of a country musician, and my cover gigs are pop rock. So it really kind of depends on how you want to take it that way too.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what would your method or recommendation be for people in terms of like getting started, finding the right venues or finding the people to reach out to? So it sounds like, if I'm understanding you, kind of the process is, one, if you're interested in actually making like a living with just your music to start out with and not having to work a day job, then getting started with cover gigs is a fantastic way to do it. It improves your skills as a musician. You get to learn a lot of music. Um, it sounds like, if that's something if someone's watching this right now and it's something that they might be interested in, but they haven't played any of those gigs before, they don't know like how to even get started. A good place for them to start out would be open mic nights, busking. Would you recommend they go to Google and they just like type in open mic night and then like the name of their like city, or how exactly would they find open mic nights or find like the venues to do that?
Yeah, so that's definitely where I would start, from there for sure. This is also a silly idea I thought of. If like they really haven't performed out much lately, if they can't find any places that have open mic, go to a karaoke night and just like, sing your best karaoke. I know it sounds silly, but it's like it gets you more comfortable in front of an audience. So that was just an idea that I thought of. But yeah, I would say, I mean, I fortunately live in a place where there's open mics every night all over the place because it's Los Angeles. If you live in New York or Nashville or any other place like that, like there are like even like I think Austin, Texas is probably another one. Like they're going to have open mics every night. Now, if you live someplace in the middle of Kansas, you may have a more difficult time. So I would start with Google, but as you go and progress and start booking gigs at different places, one of the methods that I've found to be the most effective is just like Google searching like venues that have live music, but then actually looking at the website. Now, this is going to take some time, so it's a little tedious, but I promise it works. Like you just have to go to the website, see if they actually have live music, see if what your music that like the music that you perform, the music that you do fits with their venue. And then what I found to be really helpful is I actually look at who they have performing, see if they're anything like me. So that's like another thing. And then from there, looking up those artists and seeing where else they play.
Mm.
And then basically finding out that's how you can find out where all these other places are that have live music. And that's been honestly like as I've progressed, like I've found that to be an even more effective way because then I know for sure that venue has live music because they're booking this other musician. So
Yeah, that's
like a little secret ninja hack.
yeah. Erin's got the ninja hacks for us.
Yeah.
That's really really great. I can see why that especially would be a really good method, because yeah, if that artist is playing those gigs and they're kind of on this circuit, um, there's already a momentum behind it. I mean, it's kind of like the tour hacking method that I teach. Part of the reason that it works is because there's like this momentum to it. I mean, and it's just like the classic law of inertia, like things in
Yeah.
motion tend to stay in motion. And so if you're trying to book, shows at a venue that's never booked live music before, it's probably going to be a lot tougher. You probably, you could do it, but it's going to take a lot more effort. It's like trying to start a fire with your hands with two sticks rather than, putting like a stick next to an already existing fire and seeing it light up.
Yeah.
Okay. So so when you're kind of researching and you're finding these venues and you're finding these artists, do you use like an Excel sheet, or what does like your actual system or process look like?
Yeah. So Google Drive is my best friend, the Google Sheets.
Yes.
It's honestly been a huge game changer. When I first started out, I had like a little notepad like this, and I was writing like the venue, and then I was writing like, when I reached out to them, no other information.
Mm.
And then I would follow up, but it was hard to keep up with it. So I ended up creating a system for myself where I actually have a spreadsheet. And I started this when I lived in New York, where it was like New York City, like so specific to New York City and different venues in New York City. And then Long Island, venue specific to Long Island. And then I did Long Island wineries. And then I had a whole, list of those. And then I basically transferred that over to California. So now I have Los Angeles, outside Los Angeles. If there's like a specific wine country that I'm focused on, because there's so much out here in California, like Temecula is a big one that's like pretty close to Los Angeles. So I have Temecula as a specific one. And so having that be specific, that's, that can keep you organized. But then I basically, when I go and research a venue, I always put the name of the venue, obviously, the email to reach out to. If there's a contact name, if you have a contact name, that's amazing because that you basically know it's going to the right person that it needs to go to. Because otherwise you're just emailing like info at, or, like contact at or whatever. And
Right.
then, the next column, I put the phone number if you want to call. There are people that have had success with cold calling. I have not. I've found that I either get the answering machine or they give me the contact name and here's their email. Like they don't transfer me. So, but there have been a lot of people out there that have cold called and have had success. So I'm not saying don't do that. I always put the website, and then the neighborhood also is huge too, since there's so many different areas of LA. So when I'm creating those emails, I can see, oh, okay, great. This one is in Beverly Hills. Oh, I played this gig in Santa Monica, which isn't that far from Beverly Hills. So let me put that there, you know? So yeah, there's a lot of things you can do with it.
That's awesome. Do you think that we could actually get like a duplicate or a template of?
Yeah, for sure. Sure. Yeah, I can definitely send that over and set something up so you can see how it works. And then also, one of the other major things is the most important column, I would have to say, probably is the date contacted column. So I basically put the date that I contacted them, and then I follow up depending on if I have a gig coming up. Like there's some venues that I have that I'm actually not reaching out to because I'm going to be playing a different type of gig later on this month that will benefit if I wait to reach out to that gig, if you know what I mean, if that makes sense. I'm basically going to be playing like a big event in Anaheim, and it's like kind of like how like downtown Disney has like all these restaurants and stuff like that. So it's going to be something similar to that. And so there's other plazas or shopping plazas where that would be significant if I just wait until after that event's over. So then I can add it to my email. So yeah, the contact column is definitely one of the most important. So then you can see when you contacted them and then when you can follow up the next time.
Right. Yeah.
And then if I get a no, like if it's like we're all booked or our roster's full or we don't have live music anymore, then I know I can just like highlight it in red and then I don't reach out to that venue anymore.
Awesome. Yeah, it definitely seems like it would be really valuable to have, to also kind of categorize them or organize them by venues that you've played before. Maybe even like, have like a column for like how much like they paid you for it. Awesome. That's really solid. So here's like a random idea for you. I've seen like a lot of my friends, like my business friends, have started to use outsourcing a lot, especially when it comes to things like researching and like finding venues and things like that. And it's like relatively cheap. There's what is it called? I think it's called Get Magic. And it's like it's like AI mixed with real people. And it's pretty awesome. It's like pretty high quality outsourcing. And I think it's something like probably $10 to $20 an hour or something. So it's like relatively cheap. But I bet that we could work on this together maybe if you want, and kind of come back and share this like as another like segment of the system that we're talking about here. But I bet that we could free up like a lot of your resources. Like what would it be like? I mean, obviously you'd have to do some like training or have some systems where you kind of like specifically tell them what to look for. And like, you as an artist, like you mentioned, like you're going to be looking for specific venues, and you also have specific things that you're going to say to different venues based on like where you've performed before. Mm-hmm. But I bet if you included that in your basically like your order, like for the automation for the virtual assistant, I bet that they could actually take a lot of that off your plate so that you just could get like a flow of leads where they've already reached out to those emails and they've already gotten follow-ups, so you don't necessarily need to reach out to all the people yourself anymore, and they can even fill in like all the Google Sheet like stuff like themselves, so that you can kind of go back in afterwards.
No, that is a great idea. That's definitely something I'm looking into as like there's more and more projects coming down the line,
Yeah. I think that's kind of one natural step in the process is like whenever we start something up new for the first time, like a lot of times we're kind of spinning a lot of plates, like we're wearing a lot of different hats, we're doing everything ourselves. We kind of have to learn how it works before we can start creating systems effectively. Because if we try to start creating systems right off the bat, then a lot of times we don't even know what we're doing in the first place. So it's like we're creating. But yeah, I think you're kind of at the point where you've done it enough and you know exactly what to say to people. And yeah, like, there's going to be some variation. Someone else probably isn't going to be able to do as good of a job as you could. I think the way I've heard it before is that, like, if you can get them to a point where they're like, doing half as good of a job as you would, but that's still completely off your plate, and it's like, $10 or $20 an hour, then I think that would be a pretty awesome thing for you to be able to kind of like free up a lot of your time so that you could focus more on selecting, the best gigs that you want to do.
Yeah. No, that's a great idea. And that's definitely something I've thought of, especially over time. Because like there's just so many things to manage when you're a like solo musicpreneur.
Awesome. Okay. So again, just to kind of recap the system up to this point, if I'm understanding you right, is starting out, if really the goal that we're getting here to is that someone who loves music, loves to perform music, wants to be able to perform music and make that like their job and actually make an income and support themselves doing it. Not working at McDonald's or working a day job, like they can just do their music. That's kind of the goal we're getting to here. And kind of the path that we've outlined is starting out doing some open mics, doing like some busking, doing some free gigs, getting more comfortable, and then doing some research on Google, finding venues, like looking for live music venues for whatever is like your specific niche. So if you're an acoustic musician, maybe it's wineries, maybe it's breweries if you're a band. And it's starting to make a list. And Erin's awesome, so she's going to give us the template here. So we'll have like a download as you're watching this. But you start filling in the names of these venues and like the contact email. And I guess the next step that maybe we can talk a little bit about is, I mean, you already did kind of outline this, and maybe you could even have an outline, like a template for an email for them that they could kind of tweak, or at least like an example email that they can use to send to these people. I guess, yeah. So you actually have already kind of talked about that. You talked about what you include in the actual email. So I know we talked a little bit about this, but when it comes to negotiating like the price, do you have any sort of like tips for that? Or do you usually just kind of go with what the venue like says like upfront? Or do you like do you use like examples from the past of like other wineries that you've played at, or how exactly does that work?
I always like take a temperature of like what it sounds like the venue is, like, or what they offer. Like there's some venues where I'll reach out to them and I'm like, oh, it looks like they're kind of a small operation. They're probably not gonna pay too much. And again, like depending on what your financial situation is, you can take it or leave it. Like I try and take every opportunity that I can because it's another show under my belt. It's, more money in my pocket, but it also depends on the size of the winery. But honestly, like think about what you want to be paid per hour. And honestly, when it really comes down to it, and like this can kind of inspire somebody, like think about like if you are working a day job at like a retail location or a restaurant or something like that, are you making like $25 an hour? Are you making $50 an hour? Probably not. But I usually charge between $50 and $75 an hour for my gigs. But think about it. I'm playing for 3 hours instead of 7 or 8 hours, where you would work a day job for 7 or 8 hours. So really when you think about it, okay, maybe like $200 is not a ton of money, but beats working a day job for 8 hours and you're making that amount of, $50, $70 an hour, $75 an hour in, 3 or 4 hours time. So I think that's kind of like really when you have to like weigh those kind of things, and it's a hustle. Like you have to really want it and you have to work hard. And I know that there's a lot of musicians out there that are like, oh, well, I'm not a business person. I'm not this, I'm not that. But in today's day and age, like you have to put on that business cap every once in a while because the music industry has changed so radically.
Mm. Yeah, I think that is really important. Is being able to even if you look at like some of the most successful musicians of all time, usually they are also like very savvy business people. You know, like that's part of why they were so successful is because, I mean, one story that I heard recently, but applies to musicians, but it was more about authors. Like sometimes people are jaded or people are kind of trolls or critical of people who make money with music or like with artwork. You know, there's kind of this like idea of like
Stigma,
selling.
yeah.
Yeah, I really think that's just something that we need to get over. This like idea that it's not fair. Someone who's more like technically talented, like that has music that's more technical and more advanced, might not be as successful as, you know, an artist that takes the time to really connect with their fan base. You know, and when it comes to connecting with your fan base, like that is marketing. I think in the truest form of business or the most successful form of business, marketing is part of the product. You know, like the product, especially with musicians, like your music in and of itself, the people that it connects with, the impact that you make, like that is part of your marketing. And some of the most effective business marketing you can do is figuring out what is my voice, like what do I stand for, what's unique about it? What's my story, who can I connect with, whose lives can I change with my music. The story that I heard that was, it wasn't in the music industry, but it was talking about a best-selling author. And he was working there's a best-selling author, and he was working with like basically he was mentoring an author who was actually like a lot more talented than he was. And you know, she wasn't very successful. She wasn't selling very many books, and she didn't really understand why. And he said, like, well, if you look at literally the words, they don't call it a best writing author. It's a best selling author, you know, because the person had this like aversion to selling. And that kind of struck a chord. And I think it applies to musicians too, where it's like, you know, part of like your success as a musician, your success playing cover gigs, your success with your music is going to come a lot from your ability to sell yourself. And selling, I think our relationship with selling plays a huge role in how successful we are as a business and like as musicians at having a music career. So if we think of selling as something that's like negative and manipulative and, you know, something that needs to be avoided at all costs, then I think usually we're kind of framing, we're assuming that all selling has like a negative impact. Like we should resist it. We shouldn't do it. And I think sometimes selling gets a bad name from people who are, you know, abusing it and trying to manipulate and whatever. But I think the other side of the coin is that selling, the best salespeople, they aren't trying to get you to buy something that you don't want or you don't need. The best salespeople are the people who are actually like listening to you and are actually just trying to help you solve a problem. But I think it is a really important mindset to kind of come into it with is realizing that there's nothing wrong with making money or like, you know, being business minded as a musician, because that's going to be how you support yourself. And it's going to be how you connect with more people and make a bigger impact.
Well, and I think that's what separates the professional musician from the hobby musician. Because if you don't want to make a business out of it and you don't want to make a living out of it and you don't want to put the work in, then you just do it as a hobby. Like you're not that serious about it. Like, to be completely bluntly honest, if you want it that bad and you want to be a professional musician, you'll work hard at it and you will utilize the business side and create a fan base. You can't expect the fans to come to you. You have to create it, you know? So yeah, I think that what you're saying, that's all very, very valid.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really important. One thing that came to mind as you were talking about persuading and like, you know, and presenting yourself in the best light, I think one of the biggest challenges for a lot of musicians, and it's probably one of the reasons that the music industry is overall in kind of like a tough place right now, is I think that a lot of musicians undervalue themselves and they undervalue their time and they undervalue like the service that they essentially provide for what they do. Um, and we're getting kind of like into like mindset, like, internal stuff here. But one analogy that I really, really like, and I think could be helpful for someone who's kind of struggling with some of those confidence issues, is that we tend to behave in congruence with our self-image. So like if we see ourselves a certain way, then we'll tend to act like we believe that we are. And so in a lot of ways, we're kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy, where if we believe that we belong somewhere, then we'll act in ways that, put us there, and that other people, see us being that way, and then they also treat us that way.
Yeah.
So one analogy that I heard that kind of helps provide like a concrete example is that our self-image is like a thermostat on the wall. And so if we think that we belong at like 75 degrees, then it's kind of like our thermostat is at 75 degrees. And if things start picking up, like if we start booking, so for example, maybe like let's say that we believe that our time is worth like $100 for a gig, for like a 5-hour gig, and we just believe that, then that's sort of like our we're set at 75 degrees. So then if all of a sudden things start to heat up, if it starts to get to like 78 degrees and our thermostat is still set at 75 degrees, then subconsciously, like our internal thermostat kind of kicks in and it cools things down and notices that things are getting hot, and it's like, I don't deserve to be here, like this feels weird, like this doesn't feel right, like someone's gonna call me a fake, like. And it brings us back down. A lot of times it's internal, but it's also sometimes like our environment, it's like the people
Yeah.
around us, if they think that that we'd belong at a certain level because they've gotten to know us at that level, they see things heating up, they'll kind of pull us back down subconsciously. It's not like they're just like, screw you, like it's just
Yeah.
something like naturally that happens. And then vice versa, like if you think that you belong at 75 degrees and then things start going like kind of poorly and like, things aren't going well, then a lot of times our thermostat kicks in, like, I don't deserve this. I'm going to hustle. I'm going to work really hard. I'm going to get myself back up to where I was.
Yeah.
And so I think, if you're listening to this and you're kind of at a place right now where you feel like you don't have like the confidence maybe necessarily to charge, $300 for a couple hours of playing a show, then what I would recommend or challenge you to do is to actually kind of write down, like figure out like a self-image. Imagine yourself being the person that you want. It's kind of like Gandhi says, be the change that you want to see. Actually kind of create a vision of your goals, of who you want to be. And whether it's like affirmations or just visualization, taking like 5 minutes, 10 minutes in the morning to reread those goals or that vision for yourself, and like imagining yourself as if you've already done it. Our subconscious brains, it doesn't really notice the difference that much between memories and imaginations. And so if we like imagine ourselves if we keep like visualizing and imagining ourselves being the person that we want to be, then a lot of times, like when opportunities come up that are going to move us towards that path, then automatically we just kind of move towards it. So I think for someone who's planning on taking this process and doing it, a really important thing to do as you're doing this is imagine yourself being the kind of person who is consistently booking $300 gigs and is able to start doing this and deserving it. And if you have that in your mindset and you're also kind of following this path, then you'll feel more comfortable. You'll feel like you deserve it more, and you won't subconsciously sabotage yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And to that point too, it's also like I don't do gigs for free anymore. Like that's not, unless there's like only one unless, and that's if I know the opportunity is going to open up a door to all these other opportunities.
Mm.
But that's another instance of what you're saying. Like, don't undervalue yourself. If you are providing a service for someone, you should be paid for your time. And maybe when you're first starting out, okay, maybe you do play a gig for an hour for like $25 or something, like, it's $25 you didn't have before and you're playing music. So it's not that bad.
Yeah.
But as you start, like there are gigs as you start to get more and more successful, as you start to like book more and more gigs and like have to turn down other gigs, like, yeah, you are like, that is worth your time. Like, your time is money, and like, that's your job. And don't undervalue yourself, and do charge like what you believe that you should be charged. Now, don't go into a place thinking you're going to get thousands of dollars. If it's like a small wine bar, like, that's just not happening, and they'll immediately laugh at you and you'll lose out on that opportunity. But like, yeah, don't undervalue yourself. And like, as you start to do this, like, don't take a gig if they're not going to pay you, unless there's going to be some other great opportunity that'll open up from it.
Mm. Yeah.
So I love that. I love that idea of the thermostat. That's a good analogy.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love what you just said. And yeah, like that's an important point, is like, if you have never played a show before and you start like imagining that you're just like getting paid tens of thousands of dollars right away for playing shows, then that's probably not going to be very effective, because, you need to work your way up to it. But one of the reoccurring themes that like I'm just like noticing everywhere now, I think this is this universal rule or law, and I don't know like exactly why or how it works, but every like successful business owner and musician, or like everyone I know, applies this principle of the 80-20 rule. And the 80-20 rule basically states that in any sort of situation, 80% of the results usually come from 20% of the actions. Let's say that you play like 20 shows a month, or maybe let's say you play like 30. What would be a good math number to make this easy? Let's say
You're
that you
asking the
play.
wrong person.
let's say that you're playing 100 gigs a month, and you're applying this rule. Then basically what it would mean is that 20 of those gigs, if you took those 20 gigs, they actually earned you more income and had better results than all the other 80 gigs combined. And so if you look at those gigs, then generally there's like a pattern between them, and you'll see like, oh, like, these are the highest value ones out of all the ones I do. They kind of have this in common. And so a lot of processes and goals and training that's designed to kind of get you to the next level is all about identifying what is like the top 20% of what you're currently doing that's giving you 80% of the results.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the funny thing about it too, is like that it kind of never ends. It's like this like never ending thing, because it's like, even after if you just focus on the top 20%, then it's like the top 20% of the top 20%, and like, so on, And so it's something that is like a continually reflective process, I think, of like figuring out what is the 20% and honing in on that and focusing on that. But that's like, if you consistently do that, then you kind of 5x your results like over and over. And I think that's how you can kind of, jump between levels, is starting to zero in and focus on those sorts of things. So like, as someone who's a musician who's just starting out, you might not have like that many opportunities, like where you have like 100 gigs that you can choose like the 20 that are giving you the best results. You might just have to start out by just taking as many gigs as you possibly can, so you can kind of get a feel for it, you can experience. But then after you start getting things rolling for a little bit, one thing I would recommend doing is reflecting and looking back at those gigs. And if you're keeping track of like how much you're earning per gig, or like what kind of benefits you're getting from like those gigs, then I think you'll probably find that that 20% of the gigs that you're playing are responsible for most of the results. In which case, if you stop, it's going to feel bad, because like at first it's going to be like, why am I turning this down? Like, this is like, this is a good thing, like they're paying me, or this is working. But if we have the discipline to like, you'd be like, okay, I'm not doing any more of like the 80%. I'm just going to focus on the 20%. Then I think that's really where like leverage starts to come in, and we can really start to magnify our results.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Okay, so I feel like we've covered a lot of really, really solid ground in here. Like, and I think that there's a very specific person that is going to watch this that's going to get the most value out of it. I think it really is kind of geared towards someone who's a beginner, who hasn't started playing like cover gigs or anything yet, but wants kind of like the first step towards
Yeah.
having a full-time living with their music.
And someone I think also that like maybe is playing, because like I know that we have all these in LA, and I'm sure you have them too, or you're in our like Orlando area, right?
Right.
Like there's so many venues that are like those pay to play
Mm.
gigs, and it's like they're the worst. It's like, why? Or like you have to sell this many tickets, and when you're just starting out, you don't really have a fan base, and like you don't want to annoy everybody to come to every single gig of yours. So it's like I also think it's a good, not wake up call, but it's like a good opportunity for people that maybe like are like, I'm done with this. Like I just want to start making money with my gigs.
All right, Erin. So thank you so much for being a part of this interview. I feel like there's a lot of gold in here for anyone who's interested in basically starting out and like quitting their day job and just being able to make music full time and support themselves. This is like an awesome step by step system for doing it. So thank you so much for your time.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So okay. So let's say that someone is interested in learning more from you. Where can they go to find you?
So you can actually, I've started a goal setting and time management business for anyone, but also I'm a musician, so specifically musicians as well. So if you just go to goalforyourdreams.com, you can go ahead there and learn more. And you can also click the link below to grab a free template of what I do when I reach out to venues.
Yeah, awesome. So Erin has been kind enough to actually go ahead and create a duplicate of the template that she uses to reach out to venues. So like the email and the actual Google sheet where she kind of keeps track of everything. So yeah, like she said, there's gonna be a button below the video. You can click that. You can get those. And yeah, you're awesome. Thank you, Erin.
Thank you.